Chapter 91. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Back then, the king of Yen could supply Hellion foam with exotic birds, but the court already had plenty of those. The thing was, exotic birds could only carry a limited load, so only a select few could use them. First off, you had to be a strong cultivator and not afraid of the freezing wind to even control the birds. After the Empress gave Tai Wuk his orders, he used these birds to get back to the capital ASAP. He left in the evening and arrived the next morning. Once there, Tai Wuk didn't go home to rest. He went straight to the Divine Detective Department's office. Before becoming the Empress's head guard, Tai Wuk had been one of the department's top detectives, a real gold medalist, and knew his way around a crime scene. Truth be told, if his adoptive father hadn't held the top spot, Tai Wuk had the skills and strength to take it himself. Besides investigating this case, the Empress also sent him back to eventually take over the detective department. "Hail, Iron Detective!" Seeing Tai Wuk show up at the department, looking serious, all the detectives were shocked and bowed to greet him. "Bring me everything that belonged to my adoptive father." Tai Wuk was in no mood for pleasantries and just barked the order with a blank look on his face. All the detectives knew who Tai Wuk was and what he could do, so no one dared to refuse. Before long, Wuanbang's belongings were packed in a box and given to Tai Wuk. The reason these items hadn't been taken away before was because the Minister of Justice had given special instructions. The investigation was moving at a snail's pace, still stuck on the autopsy, so nobody really cared about these things. Looking at the familiar items, Tai Wuk's eyes filled with sadness. Still, he kept his grief in check and carefully examined each item. He knew his adoptive father well. He was cautious and always planned ahead. Unless something sudden happened and he didn't have time to react, he would definitely leave a clue. Sure enough, before long, Tai Wuk found a secret letter hidden in an inkstone, and this letter was addressed to him. "My son, Wuk, by the time you read this, I fear something has happened to me. This trip is dangerous, and I'm prepared for the worst. But no guts, no glory. As the chief constable, people depend on me. I can't be a coward." Reading this, Tai Wuk couldn't hold back the tears. Real men don't cry, but this wasn't the time to be strong. He took a deep breath, tried to calm down, and continued reading. The rest of the letter contained what Wuanbang had uncovered, along with his hunches. Of course, the letter wasn't too detailed since space was limited. Wuanbang wasn't some genius. He didn't overthink things when he wrote the letter. It was just a backup plan, but he never thought it would actually be needed. The heavenly prison. After reading the letter, Tai Wuk's mind locked onto that place. If he was right, that was where his adoptive father was headed. He didn't know what secrets were hidden in the heavenly prison, but his adoptive father's death was likely linked to it. However, he didn't rush into anything. Instead, he followed the Empress's orders and went to see Prince Duan first. "Why has Her Majesty sent you to me?" Prince Duan was in the palace. When he heard Tai Wuk was there on the Empress's orders, he quickly went to meet him. "Her Majesty said you would know what to do about this." Tai Wuk repeated the Empress's words. Prince Duan understood. He sighed. "These are trying times. I didn't want to get involved, but fate had other plans." He turned to Tai Wuk. "Before coming here, you went to the Divine Detective Department. Did you find anything useful? This is a letter my adoptive father left before he died. Please, take a look." Tai Wuk handed the letter to Prince Duan. Prince Duan read it carefully. After a long silence, he looked up and said, "Heavenly prison." Tai Wuk nodded firmly. "Yes, I suspect his death is connected to that place." Prince Duan narrowed his eyes. He couldn't help but think of an old friend locked up in the heavenly prison. Even though he was his friend, he might not be considered a friend to the Ji family. After all, what the Empress did to him was brutal. If he was bitter because of that, it would be understandable, but that guy was too dangerous, capable of miracles, able to turn the world upside down. That was a problem. A person like that couldn't be trusted, otherwise, he wouldn't have suggested the Empress secretly execute him, but she refused. Suddenly, he remembered the Empress wasn't in the capital and had fully entrusted him with this matter, so, could he? "If I asked you to kill someone special, would you be willing?" Prince Duan asked, staring at Tai Wuk. Tai Wuk was confused. He frowned and asked, "Is it connected to my adoptive father's death?" "Maybe yes, maybe no, but if you kill him, I can avenge your adoptive father." "So, are you in or are you out?" Prince Duan said honestly. Tai Wuk hesitated. Normally, he would refuse without a second thought. After all, his adoptive father taught him to be careful, never wrongly accuse the innocent, and never harm anyone. That's how his adoptive father lived, and that's why people called him the Real God of Catching. But his adoptive father had died a violent death, so, should he follow his example? Tai Wuk suddenly felt a surge of emotion. He looked up at Prince Duan and asked coldly, "Who do you want me to kill?" Hearing his answer, Prince Duan laughed. He knew Tai Wuk's choice. In his eyes, Tai Wuk was great at everything, with amazing talent and a bright future, but he was too stubborn, just like Wuanbang. Luckily, unlike Wuanbang, Tai Wuk could still be saved. "You must be exhausted from traveling. Go back and get some rest. Tomorrow morning, I'll take you there myself." Prince Duan patted Tai Wuk on the shoulder and smiled. Before that, he had to send someone to investigate. He couldn't go in blind, but to him, a simple case was nothing. He already had a plan. Once this was over, he would train Tai Wuk. With his talent, as long as he stayed loyal to the Ji family, they would have another obedient dog. That's right, just an obedient dog. That's all the Ji family needed. Jiang Hao and Wuanbang, on the other hand, weren't obedient enough, so, they both deserved to die. Chapter 92. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Has the court even bothered to send anyone to look into what happened here? That evening, on the 18th floor of Heavenly Prison, Jiang Hao looked up and asked after enjoying the lavish dinner Tao Gongwang had sent. Tao Gongwang, standing nearby and looking equally puzzled, shook his head. "Not a soul. You sure someone didn't sneak in already? Maybe you were busy and missed them." Facing Jiang Hao's suspicious stare, Tao Gongwang puffed out his chest, as if deeply offended. "No way. I've got my eyes on everything. Anyone who tried to come in, whether openly or in secret, wouldn't get past me. I've been warden of Heavenly Prison for years. I can't vouch for anywhere else, but in this little corner, nothing escapes my notice." Seeing his indignant expression, Jiang Hao inwardly sighed. He really wanted to point out that the Shadow Demon could hide anything from him, but Shadow Demon was an exception. Under normal circumstances, it really would be hard to slip past Tao Gongwang unnoticed. "This doesn't add up," Jiang Hao muttered, frowning. "It's been ages. Are these people always this slow?" So many important people had died. Logically, a case that big should have sent shockwaves through the court and the public. Even if they tried to bury it afterward, someone should be here, poking around, trying to figure things out. He and Tao Gongwang had even rehearsed their story, just in case, but now it felt like they were talking to a brick wall. No investigation after this long. Something was definitely off. Could it be because Her Majesty isn't in the capital right now? Tao Gongwang wondered. "She's not?" Jiang Hao asked, surprised. Tao Gongwang nodded. "I overheard someone talking about it. Apparently, the Demon God Empire sent 1,000,000 troops to the border. Her Majesty was worried, so she took off overnight. She hasn't been around lately. The court seems to have handed the case off to the Ministry of Justice. I'm afraid of drawing attention, so I haven't dared ask around. But someone saw Tai Wuk racing back this morning. With his connections, he's bound to push for a full investigation." Tao Gongwang spilled all the news he had. Tai Wuk. Jiang Hao searched his memory and remembered who that was. He was one of the Divine Detective Department's star investigators, and a powerhouse in the heavenly human realm. More importantly, he was the adopted son of Wuanbang, the department's chief. Now that Wuanbang was out of the picture, he'd rushed back, so he wouldn't let things go easily. Jiang Hao felt no guilt about this. After all, Wuanbang had been relentless in his investigation of him. He wasn't a pushover. He had to defend himself. Besides, he'd given Wuanbang a chance to back down, but Wuanbang hadn't taken it. Ultimately, they were on opposite sides. There was no right or wrong in the real world. Things weren't so black and white. As for Tai Wuk, before, Jiang Hao might have been worried. But after taking down 4 heavenly realm powerhouses in a row, Jiang Hao knew just how strong he'd become. he didn't sweat ordinary heavenly realm experts anymore. If he doesn't stir up trouble, we can both live in peace. But if he's determined to get himself killed, I can always arrange a family reunion. A flicker of light appeared in Jiang Hao's eyes, and then he shrugged it off. What was one more problem to worry about? Eventually, the truth would come out, he'd deal with it then. Instead of stressing out, he might as well get more sleep, practice the sleeping dragon technique and improve his cultivation. Progress in the heavenly realm was slow, but it was still progress, right? Small steps led to big distances. Even if Jiang Hao was taking it easy, he wasn't giving up. With that thought, Jiang Hao brushed aside his worries, dismissed Tao Gongwang, told Yao to keep an eye out, and went back to sleep. Dreaming, or cultivating, time always flew by. In the blink of an eye, another night had passed. Jiang Hao woke up to a new day. The system notification chimed as expected. It was a mechanical voice, devoid of emotion, but it sounded wonderful to Jiang Hao, like the most beautiful, kind, and pleasant sound in the world. Ding, laying down for 6 months has earned a special reward. Congratulations to the host for receiving a heroic spirit card. It wasn't the coveted natural treasure that would boost his cultivation speed, but a heroic spirit card sounded promising. Jiang Hao wasn't planning a rebellion at the moment, but that didn't mean he couldn't plan ahead. The biggest lesson he'd learned from being imprisoned by the Empress was to never let his fate be in someone else's hands. There were things he could live without, but never that. So, even though he didn't have a clear vision of the future, he could set things up in advance. The heroic spirit card represented a hero, or heroes, with extraordinary abilities, who could be incredibly useful in a variety of situations, like the Zhang Jiao brothers, or Chen Sheng and Wu Guang. I wonder which hero I'll summon this time. Maybe Li Zicheng, Zhang Xianzhong, or some other rebel leader. If I get a few more rebel leaders, this place will turn into a rebel base in no time. Jiang Hao inwardly groaned. He looked at the system space. A black card floated there, radiating a mysterious aura and shimmering with the power of the rules. As his cultivation grew stronger, Jiang Hao could feel the card's power more clearly. It was a magical creation, like the other 2 cards. This one had a line of text written on it. Jiang Hao read it carefully. A hero in troubled times. Jiang Hao's eyes narrowed. He immediately thought of Prime Minister Chao. After all, Cao Cao's most famous assessment was, a capable minister in a peaceful world, a hero in troubled times. When Zhang Ju was summoned, his brothers Zhang Bao and Zhang Liang came along. When Chen Sheng was summoned, Wu Guang showed up. So, if Prime Minister Chao was summoned, would his civil and military officials also appear? Thinking of the Hall of Fame lineup under Cao Cao, Jiang Hao's mouth watered. He wasn't greedy. He'd be happy with Su Chu, Dian Wei, Xiahou Dun, Xiahou Yuan, Chao Ren, Chao Hong, Chao Chun, Zhang Liao, Su Huang, Zhang He, Lu Jin, and Eugene. Hey, those were all generals. He should add some civil officials and counselors. Gu Jia, Sun Yu, Shi Jizai, Jia Su, Su Yu, Cheng Yu, Sima Yi, Lu Yi. Was that a lot? Not really. Jiang Hao said he wasn't greedy at all. Chapter 93. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Jiang Hao didn't hesitate. He played the heroic spirit card immediately, but instead of Prime Minister Chao, the guy who showed up was different, and forget about his civil and military staff. They were a no-show too. As the light from the rules faded, a fat dude materialized in front of him. He had a mean mug, cheekbones that could cut glass, a massive build, and a barrel chest. The guy was basically a huge meatball, or maybe a bear just waking up from hibernation. Everything about him screamed savage and overbearing, radiating a menacing aura. Bottom line, he looked like trouble, the kind that makes you instinctively want to back away. Seriously? Jiang Hao's face fell. He recognized him instantly. He was a prime minister too, but not that Prime Minister Chao. This was the notorious Prime Minister Dong Zhuo, the fat man himself. Granted, Cao Cao had started out working under him. But their skill sets. Worlds apart. When you think of Cao Cao, you think of someone with both brains and brawn, a military genius. He's a top-tier historical figure, no question, but Dong Zhuo? People remember him for ambition, tyranny, arson, looting, a casual disregard for human life, excessive drinking, and a whole lot of debauchery. Basically, a walking red flag. The problem was, the summon was done. No refunds, no exchanges. Guess there's always a gap between dreams and reality. Jiang Hao sighed, resigned to his fate. Then he looked at the crew standing behind Dong Zhuo. Right, just like before, this heroic spirit card came with extras, 3 of them this time. One was a skinny guy with a feather fan and scholar's cap, another was a beefy, straightforward-looking dude who seemed like a military type, the last one was a towering figure, strong as an ox, with a commanding presence and a heroic spirit. His eyes were like burning stars, and his face was all sharp angles. He practically oozed masculinity, the very definition of heroic. The real deal, red hair among horses, Lu Bu among men. That's right, standing there was the #1 military commander of the 3 kingdoms, Lu Bu, Lu Fengxian. As for the other 2, Jiang Hao pegged them pretty quickly. Li Ru and Niu Fu. Li Ru and Niu Fu were both Dong Zhuo's sons-in-law. Add in Lu Bu, Dong Zhuo's adopted son, and you had one happy family, which was probably why they all showed up together in this world. These 4 are bad news. Jiang Hao muttered to himself. In the last 2 summons, Zhang Ju and his brothers, and Chen Sheng and Wu Guang, were rebel leaders, sure, but they weren't evil. Not like these guys. Don't even get him started on Dong Zhuo. The kindest thing you could say was he was a hero in troubled times. And Li Ru. Jiang Hao thought he was more deserving of the title poisoner than Jia Su. From deposing the Han Emperor to killing the young emperor and burning Luoyang to the ground, he was the mastermind behind some truly vile schemes. Lu Bu might have been the ultimate warrior in the 3 kingdoms, but his nickname, 3 surname slave, said it all. He killed both of his adoptive fathers. Being his adoptive dad had to be one of the most dangerous jobs around. Niu Fu was less famous than the others, but he had his quirks. He was known for practicing magic with military talismans, loving divination and witchcraft, greed, and a real taste for the ladies. In short, this quartet was trouble with a capital T. As the light faded and memories flooded in, Dong Zhuo and the others started to come to, their eyes immediately locking onto Jiang Hao. But Jiang Hao kept his mouth shut, and they weren't about to start the conversation. The 5 of them stared at each other, trapped in a silent standoff that just kept getting weirder and weirder. Jiang Hao couldn't take it. Too much staring. It could be misinterpreted. He broke the ice. How are you feeling? Hearing Jiang Hao finally speak, Dong Zhuo and the others visibly relaxed. They stepped forward to greet him in unison. We're feeling great, Master. Jiang Hao gave a slight nod. Even though they were acting all innocent, Jiang Hao knew their history. He wasn't about to let his guard down. He pressed them. What do you think about this rebirth? What are your plans? Dong Zhuo and the others exchanged glances. Their mood was complicated. They remembered their previous lives, every bit of it from start to finish, but that also meant they'd already been through it all. Reborn, they were strangely okay with it all. Even Dong Zhuo and Lu Bu, the father and son who'd once been at each other's throats, could sit together calmly. No glaring, no shouting. The past is the past, Dong Zhuo said, stepping up to take the lead. Master gave us a second chance. We'll follow your orders. The others nodded in agreement. You had to give Dong Zhuo credit. The guy was sharp. Then again, how else would he have gotten as far as he did? In the 3 Kingdoms era, all the big shots came from powerful families. Even Liu Bei, with his supposedly humble background, used his imperial connections to pull in talent. Dong Zhuo came from nothing, born in Longxi, a place full of ethnic minorities. Central Plains folks looked down on him. Despite that, Dong Zhuo, a roughneck from the Bunis, climbed all the way to prime minister, ruling most of the Eastern Han Empire at his peak. You couldn't say the guy was incompetent. He crashed and burned because he let things get to his head, indulging in the good life. But if he'd stayed focused, who knows what might have happened. He might have been flawed, but he was definitely not a pushover. The same went for Lu Bu, Li Ru, and even Niu Fu. These were not just random guys. They'd left their mark on history, and Jiang Hao could see they were strong. Li Ru was a scholar, so he was a little on the weak side. But the other 3 had reached the heavenly man realm. Niu Fu was the weakest of the bunch, barely a heavenly man realm fighter. Dong Zhuo was next in line, Lu Bu was the strongest. As the top general in the Three Kingdoms, he was one of the best warriors in Chinese history. Few could match him. Now he was in a new world, and his strength had gotten a serious boost. He wasn't just at the peak of the heavenly man realm, he was at the peak of the heavenly man realm and had already figured out the power of the law. Even if they were all in the same realm, Zhang Ju or Qin Sheng wouldn't stand a chance against him. Lu Bu had been a soldier for decades, fighting in countless battles. His skills were honed to perfection. He was the ceiling for this realm. Maybe Qin Sheng and Wu Guang could give him a run for his money if they teamed up, but even then, it would just be a fight. Nobody could guarantee the outcome. Jiang Hao had a feeling Lu Bu would be the first of his crew to break through into immortality. No real reason. It was just his name, Lu Bu, Lu Fengxian. You could question his character, but you couldn't question his fighting skills. Chapter 94. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I never would have guessed the old man used to run a country and almost snagged the throne himself. Dong Zhuo stared at Jiang Hao, surprised, a new respect shining in his eyes. The world of the Great Zhou makes the Han dynasty look like a sandbox. And that throne? Overrated. Sitting on it ain't all that different from standing next to it. Hao Yun waved his hand, cool as a cucumber, dismissing the idea. Unbelievable, master's got moves. Turning the tide, saving the whole Great Zhou single-handed. That's legendary stuff, the old sages ain't got nothing on that. Li Ru clearly thought Jiang Hao's accomplishments were the real deal, his eyes gleaming with admiration. Ah, shucks, it was just a little something, no biggie, Jiang Hao said modestly, acting like it was nothing. Say, sir, I got this feeling from my memory that this world is crawling with tough guys. Is that for real? Lu Bu, way more interested in the fighting scene, rubbed his hands, a fire burning in his eyes. You bet. This world's got enemies galore. Guys like you and me, with those heaven and man powers, we can really tear things up. You won't be hurting for opponents, that's a promise, Jiang Hao said with a grin. Even Niu Fu, who was usually more reserved, couldn't help but step up, asking cautiously, my lord, is it true people here can actually do that fortune-telling stuff? Dong Zhuo's eyes popped. Niu Fu. The lord's got more important things on his mind. You're messing around with these parlor tricks in secret, and now you're dragging them out in front of the lord to embarrass us all. Jiang Hao waved a hand, stopping Dong Zhuo's rant. He turned to Niu Fu, a smile playing on his lips. Yeah, there's all sorts of magic and hidden arts here. The Wu clan down in southern Xinjiang, for example, they're really into that. Their witchcraft is something else. If you're curious, we can compare notes sometime. Niu Fu's face lit up, he wasn't the only one. Everyone got something they wanted to know from Jiang Hao, and now they were all practically drooling with excitement. Dong Zhuo craved power and the adoration of the masses. Li Ru dreamed of plotting and outmaneuvering everyone in the game. Lu Bu just wanted to fight the strongest and climb to the top. Niu Fu's ambition was smaller, focused on scratching his own intellectual itch. After this heart-to-heart with his crew, Jiang Hao started to let go of some of his initial reservations. He wasn't exactly a saint, and he didn't expect his subordinates to be moral paragons either. Truth was, those perfect people were few and far between. Most folks have their quirks, and everyone's got their flaws. Like they say, nobody's perfect, including Jiang Hao. Dong Zhuo and his guys were no different. They had their good and bad sides. Nobody's born wanting to be a bad guy. A lot of times, they're just pushed into it by the world around them. Let's be honest, in the Eastern Han Dynasty, where the scholars called the shots, what kind of options did these Xiliang warriors have besides clawing their way to the top? It's not that they didn't want to be decent, but they didn't have much choice. With that in mind, Jiang Hao decided to stop judging them so harshly. They might have their shortcomings, but if you put them in the right spot, they could be surprisingly effective. Master, company at the prison. The shadow demon suddenly materialized, delivering the message to Jiang Hao. Dong Zhuo and the others looked around, confused and on edge. Lu Bu, quick as a whip, jumped to his feet, fists clenched. Jiang Hao waved them down. Easy, it's just one of my pets. Pet, that everyone was baffled, sensing the raw power radiating from the shadow demon. Li Ru, being the most fragile of the group, was practically trembling in the face of a demon king. In his book, pets were more like fluffy friends. Whose pet was this terrifying? The shadow demon, sensing the shock and fear in the room, grinned, ready to show off. He raised a hand, and dark energy swirled into a shimmering curtain, projecting a picture of the first floor of the sky prison. They were even more blown away by this. They were starting to get a feel for the magic in this world. Jiang Hao, however, was already glued to the screen. There were indeed two people at the sky prison. One was his old acquaintance, Prince Duan Ji Yuanheng, the other was someone Jiang Hao had met a few times, Wu Anbang's adopted son, Tai Wuk. Seeing them show up, Tao Gongwang, the head warden of the sky prison, hurried to greet them. Your Highness, Prince Duan. Iron Constable. Prince Duan glanced at him, nodding with a smile. No matter what he was scheming inside, he always played the perfect, honorable prince in public. We're just taking a look around. Everyone else can stand down. Just show us the way, Warden. Prince Duan gave the order. Of course, of course. It would be my honor to lead you. Tao Gongwang wasn't about to refuse, agreeing immediately and sending his guards away. Soon, they arrived at the first cell. Tao Gongwang stepped up to unlock the door. Tai Wuk looked at Prince Duan. Prince Duan nodded. A flicker of hesitation crossed Tai Wuk's face, but was quickly replaced by a steely resolve. He took a deep breath, his expression hardening. Then, expressionless, he followed Tao Gongwang into the cell, his hand resting on the sword at his hip. The sword flashed out of its sheath in an instant, the blade sliced through the air like a bolt of lightning. Before anyone could react, the prisoners in the cell were cut down, dying instantly in a brutal massacre. Tao Gongwang shuddered at the bloody scene. Stunned, he stumbled back a few steps, then looked up at Prince Duan, stuttering, "But... Your Highness, what's going on?" Prince Duan simply gazed up at the sky, offering no explanation. Tao Gongwang was left to look at Tai Wuk. Tai Wuk said coldly, "Important officials have been murdered inside the prison. It proves that the prison must be corrupt. So why not just investigate? Why do you have to resort to murder? Are you implying that these prisoners were the masterminds?" Tao Gongwang was totally lost. He thought these two were just going to do another walkthrough like the last time, but judging by their trigger-happy attitude, that wasn't the case at all. Now is the time to recruit people. How can the court have so much energy to investigate slowly? It's easier to cut the Gordian knot. Anyway, the prisoners in the prison are all dead men. Kill them all, and the problem is solved, Tai Wuk said with a grim expression. Kill them all? Tao Gongwang was floored. He wasn't sure if he'd misheard or if Tai Wuk had misspoke. How many prisoners were in this prison? Did he really mean to kill them all? If they were all killed, what was he even doing here? Was he about to get fired? Tao Gongwang stared at Tai Wuk, blurting out, "Are you kidding me, Constable? We can't kill all prisoners in the sky prison even if we worked around the clock." Tai Wuk frowned slightly. There are that many, Tao Gongwang nodded vigorously. More than 2,000. Though Tai Wuk was a top detective, he was not a part of the prison staff, and he naturally didn't know the specifics of how many prisoners the prison held. Over 2,000 prisoners, all locked up in separate cells. Even if he worked alone, he couldn't possibly finish them all in 3 days and nights, much less one day. Tai Wuk immediately looked at Prince Duan. Prince Duan was just as surprised. After a moment of thought, he said, "In that case, let's start with the most serious criminals at the bottom. After all, they're the most suspicious." Receiving the directive, Tai Wuk turned to Tao Gongwang. "Take us to the 18th floor." "But the 18th floor is where the famous Duke of Weigua is held," Tao Gongwang said in horror, trying to warn him. Tai Wuk's face remained unchanged, as though he had expected the news. He simply said, "You can lead the way, or I can kill you and find someone else. The choice is yours." Chapter 95. You are listening at novelfull.audio. My lord, these two could be trouble. If I'm right, they're coming for you. Li Ru was sharp as ever, a top strategist. Even watching through the projection, he instantly sensed danger. He immediately looked up at Jiang Hao. but Jiang Hao looked calm, as if he'd anticipated this. Dong Zhuo and the others were furious at Li Ru's words. They wouldn't dare. Niu Fu was the first to jump to his feet, his usual mild demeanor vanished, replaced by a murderous glint in his eyes. He was a seasoned warrior from Xiuyang. After all, that harmless act was just for Jiang Hao's benefit. He was ruthless to his enemies. Just give the word, my lord, and I'll bring you their heads, Niu Fu said, as if he were picking melons. We're here, no need for you to bother. Dong Zhuo cuffed him on the head, his massive hand landed squarely on Niu Fu's eyes. Niu Fu didn't dare protest. A father-in-law was always right. Dong Zhuo straightened up, like a bear waking from hibernation, radiating a palpable aura of power. His tiger eyes blazed with a fire that made others flinch. My lord, I used to be a frontline general, but I indulged in drink and women, weakening my body. Now, I'm reborn. My strength is not only restored but greater than ever. Let me stretch my legs and see if these supposed strongmen are all they're cracked up to be. Dong Zhuo was eager to fight, volunteering for the task. His strength rivaled a top-tier heavenly man realm expert. He was among the strongest in the world. If it were just Tai Wuk, he could have gone, but Tai Wuk was with Prince Duan Ji Yuanheng. Even Jiang Hao couldn't fully understand Prince Duan yet, but he knew Prince Duan's strength was extraordinary. He was definitely a terrifying expert at the peak of the heavenly man realm. Dong Zhuo, even with Niu Fu at his side, would likely lose to Prince Duan. Among those present, only Lu Bu could compete with him. These two are dangerous. Only Wen Ho can win. Jiang Hao looked at Lu Bu. Lu Bu was also itching for a fight, but Niu Fu and Dong Zhuo had spoken first. Pride prevented him from competing with them, but now that Jiang Hao called on him, Lu Bu wouldn't back down. He immediately clasped his fists and asked, my lord, do you want them alive or dead? That he didn't ask if he could capture them, only about their fate. Capturing them alive was far more difficult than killing them. It showed how confident Lu Bu was. Niu Fu and Dong Zhuo gritted their teeth. Was he just showing off at their expense? Thinking he's so great just because he's strong? They couldn't beat Lu Bu before, but now, everything's changed. After coming to this world, their potential had skyrocketed. Given the opportunity, they might catch up. Dead or alive, it doesn't matter. What do you think of this one, Wen Ho? Jiang Hao pointed at Tai Wuk in the projection. He's skilled, with impressive swordsmanship. In my previous life, I'd be no match, but now, it's a shame I don't have my Fang Tianhua Ji. Otherwise, one strike would be enough. That even Jiang Hao was shocked, let alone Dong Zhuo and the others. They said Lu Bu was arrogant and unruly. Now he understood. His boasting was on par with Jiang Hao's. Jiang Hao couldn't help but chuckle. I don't have the Fang Tianhua Ji, but I have another long halberd, a top-tier treasure. Use it for now, Wen Ho. Jiang Hao took a long halberd from the system space and tossed it to Lu Bu. It was a reward he'd received earlier. It wasn't very useful to him. He already had the Qing Jiao sword, so the halberd stayed in the system space. Only system rewards could be stored there. Good halberd. Lu Bu took it, sensing the amazing power within. It wasn't as connected to him as the Fang Tianhua Ji, but in power alone, it surpassed his old weapon. The Fang Tianhua Ji was just made of iron. This halberd was a top-tier treasure. There was a huge difference in quality. Lu Bu was thrilled and began waving it around. Weapons were a general's life, and he was growing happier with this world. If I get the chance, I still want a Fang Tianhua Ji made specifically for me, Lu Bu said. You'll have that chance. Jiang Hao nodded, then he pointed at Prince Duan in the projection and warned him, this one is dangerous. He's well hidden, so don't underestimate him. Don't worry, my lord. With this halberd, he's no match for me. I'll go meet them now. He carried the new halberd, excited like a child with a new toy, and strode out. Meanwhile, Prince Duan and Tai Wuk, led by Tao Gongwang, arrived outside the 18th floor of the heavenly prison. The 18th floor is just ahead. Tao Gongwang hesitated, then reminded them. The Duke of Weigua is personally entrusted by the Empress. If anything happens to him, it'll be hard to explain to Her Majesty. He wasn't worried about Jiang Hao, but he didn't want Prince Duan and his men to suffer the same fate as the last group. he wasn't being kind, the previous incident was still unresolved. If Tai Wuk and Prince Duan also fell into the heavenly prison, things would spiral out of control, people might start equating the heavenly prison with hell. Prince Duan and the others assumed he sympathized with the Duke of Weigua and chuckled. This is none of your concern. Don't worry, I'll take full responsibility if His Majesty asks, Prince Duan said. Then he looked at Tai Wuk. Tai Wuk was about to grab the key from Tao Gongwang to open the door, but then, the heavy door of the 18-story heavenly prison swung open on its own. A young general with an imposing figure walked out, carrying a black halberd. Prince Duan and Tai Wuk were stunned. Who are you? Lu Bu stared at them, narrowing his eyes, and replied arrogantly, I am Zhou Lu Bu. Chapter 96. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Lu Bu of Zhou. Hearing Lu Bu's reply, Prince Duan and Tai Wuk exchanged surprised glances. Despite their high status and extensive knowledge, they were completely baffled. They'd never heard of a Lu Bu, let alone the place called Zhou. Could it be outside of the great Zhou Empire? Or some backwater they'd never encountered? Confused, Prince Duan turned to Tao Gongwang and whispered, wasn't Wei Duke Jiang Hao the only prisoner on the 18th floor? How'd anyone else get down here? But Tao Gongwang looked even more shocked. He couldn't fathom how another person had appeared and could only stammer, I have no idea. Incompetent fool. Even Prince Duan, with his self-control, nearly lost it. How could someone infiltrate the most secure floor of the prison unnoticed? What else was this person capable of? But this wasn't the time for blame. His gaze returned to Lu Bu. Though unfamiliar with this Lu Bu, he felt an immense pressure emanating from him. It was like facing not a man, but a savage beast, a powerful apex predator. Danger radiated from him. Clearly, this was no ordinary warrior, and his arrival was cause for alarm. What brings you here? Prince Duan asked, taking a deep breath. Lu Bu smirked, planted his halberd in the ground, and casually replied, I'm here to take your heads. The casual tone, as if this were the simplest thing in the world, made the prince's blood boil. Both were known for their composure, not easily provoked, but Lu Bu's arrogance was too much to take. His overconfidence, the implication that they were no more than chickens to the slaughter, was infuriating. Prince, stand aside. Let me teach this loudmouth some manners. Tai Wuk said, his eyes burning with anger. Grief over his foster father's death had already pushed him to the edge. Meeting an arrogant jerk like Lu Bu was the last straw, but before Prince Duan could respond, Lu Bu scoffed, you're no match for me. Both of you, come at me together. That was it. Tai Wuk couldn't restrain himself. Seeing his blazing fury, Prince Duan didn't try to stop him. Even Jiang Hao, secretly observing, shook his head. Lu Bu was just asking for it. No wonder he had no friends. Be careful. Don't underestimate his power. Prince Duan warned, taking a couple of steps back. Tai Wuk nodded. He wasn't some naive rookie. A warrior of the heavenly realm possessed vast combat experience and wouldn't underestimate any foe. Besides, Lu Bu wasn't hiding anything, or rather, he was too proud to bother. He radiated power, practically daring them to acknowledge his strength, so Tai Wuk, though enraged, remained cautious. He gripped the hilt of his saber, and his aura began to surge. Surprisingly, Lu Bu simply stood and watched, letting him build his momentum, as if he were allowing him to prepare. Arrogant fool. Some nobody thinks he's invincible. You'll pay for your ignorance. Tai Wuk's face darkened. He was a heavenly realm expert, yet he was being treated like dirt. He channeled his Yuan power, amplifying the force of nature around himself, pushing his power toward an unprecedented peak. Such a drawn-out build-up was rare among elite fighters. In a clash of equals, every strike was lightning fast, leaving no time to gather strength. But under Lu Bu's passive watch, Tai Wuk did just that. Yet Lu Bu didn't seem worried. He shook his head in disappointment. Is that all you've got? Lu Bu asked calmly. That was the final straw. How much could a man take? Was he a pushover? You asked for it. Tai Wuk roared. He unleashed his ultimate technique without hesitation. At his current power level, his most powerful move was devastating. The blade slashed out, like a bolt of lightning. The white light sliced through the air, hurtling toward Lu Bu at blinding speed. Interesting. At the last moment, Lu Bu moved. His movements were deceptively slow but lightning fast. The halberd swung out with incredible power and skill, deflecting the blade with ease. The two weapons collided in a shower of sparks, their energies locked in a deadly struggle, but the outcome was unexpected. Lu Bu, with no prior wind-up, easily batted aside Tai Wu's sword. Then, the halberd traced a strange arc. At an impossible angle, it avoided all obstacles and struck down like a thunderbolt. Every move was perfectly executed. This simple strike showcased Lu Bu's extraordinary combat skill. It wasn't that Tai Wu was weak, Lu Bu was just too strong in every conceivable way. With that one halberd strike, the battle was decided. With a clang, the sword fell to the ground. Tai Wu's eyes glazed over, then his body collapsed. A line of blood appeared on his neck. With one halberd strike, a heavenly realm warrior had fallen. Chapter 97. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Tai Wu, dead. Tai Wu's body hit the ground hard. The crimson blood gushing from the wound on his neck quickly formed a pool. Prince Duan stared, stunned, his eyes wide with disbelief. No way, he muttered to himself. He thought he'd sized up Lu Bu, but he'd clearly underestimated him. Tai Wu wasn't just some random strong guy. He was a gifted expert, a real powerhouse. Sure, he was relatively new to the game, maybe not top tier, but still, a genuine powerhouse, and this powerhouse had been taken out with a single strike. It was too fast, and by some nobody. If it had been a legend like the Demon King of the East Wilderness or the Buddha Lord of the Western regions, okay, he'd understand, but this was just some unknown punk. Zhou Lu Bu? Never heard of him. This rando just pops up and one-shots his prized fighter, the guy he was grooming for the Ji family. Prince Duan felt like someone was playing a sick joke on him. So this is the legendary Lu Bu. Jiang Hao, on the other hand, was thrilled. His face lit up with admiration, watching the fight through the shadow demon's projection. He couldn't hide his surprise. Lu Bu had bragged about taking out Tai Wu with one hit, but Jiang Hao hadn't taken him seriously. Everyone talks tough, right? But Lu Bu wasn't just talking. The guy was legit. That level of martial skill was just unreal. There had to be few who could match him. Who are you? Prince Duan took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. He stared at Lu Bu, speaking slowly and deliberately. Someone that strong couldn't be a nobody. He refused to believe Zhou Lu Bu was his real name. Lu Bu frowned. His pride wouldn't let him lie about something like that. I am Lu Bu of Zhou, Lu Fengxian. No aliases. My lord said you were strong. So, come on, what are you waiting for? Let's see how long you can last against me. Lu Bu stepped forward, pointing his halberd at Prince Duan. Prince Duan's face darkened. As the famous 8th Sage King, he was used to being treated with respect, but Lu Bu was acting like he was some random passerby, like he didn't matter at all. Of course, Lu Bu didn't know who he was. To him, Prince Duan was just another dude, but in Lu Bu's words, Prince Duan caught a key word, Lord. Who is this Lord you speak of? Prince Duan asked, his voice serious. He hadn't been taking the prison break seriously at first. The capital was supposed to be safe, under the Emperor's protection. Even if there were a few bad apples, they couldn't cause too much trouble. He figured it was just some petty criminals taking advantage of the situation. Sure, people had died, but the real mastermind wouldn't dare show his face. But after seeing Lu Bu in action, his opinion changed. The guy who had someone like that in his pocket was not to be taken lightly. He glanced at the 18th floor of the prison behind Lu Bu, and the image of Weiguogang Jiang Hao flashed through his mind. He didn't think Jiang Hao was the mastermind. Nothing added up. For one thing, Jiang Hao's own talent was average. No way he could have attracted a fighter like that, and Jiang Hao had never tried to build his own power base. Plus, during his time in prison, Jiang Hao had been cooperative, never contacted his students or former officials. Everything pointed away from Jiang Hao. He just didn't fit the profile, but something was nagging at him. What if it was Jiang Hao? Then things just got serious. With the right people in his pocket, he could really cause some damage. Prince Duan's mood darkened. He looked at Lu Bu. An idea struck him, and he said quickly, "You're incredibly talented. Why don't you serve the Empire? As they say, birds of a feather flock together. You're wasting your talent following some back alley villain. Join the court, and you'll have wealth, glory, horses, weapons, anything you want. It's all on the table. Prince Duan was trying to get Lu Bu to defect. Lu Bu's expression changed instantly. He thought of Li Su, then he thought of Wang Yun. If it weren't for those two, his life wouldn't have gone to hell. He'd never have been branded a three-surname slave. The thought made him sick. If they weren't already dead, he'd tear them apart himself. Now Prince Duan was trying the same trick. To Lu Bu, it was an insult, a reminder of his past. He flew into a rage. How dare you insult me, you old fool? Do you think I'm the kind of lowlife who sells himself for glory? I'll rip you to shreds. Lu Bu roared. He channeled his energy into his halberd. With his heavenly realm power fully unleashed, the halberd crackled with energy. Lu Bu swung it at Prince Duan. Prince Duan was caught off guard, but he wasn't about to take that attack head-on. He had seen what had happened to Tai Wuk. Even if he was stronger, he couldn't afford to let his guard down. You ignorant fool. I tried to give you a chance. I'll take you down first, and then we'll see who's laughing. Prince Duan retreated, dodging Lu Bu's halberd. He reached to his waist and drew a soft sword. At the same time, he broke a seal within himself, unleashing a terrifying power that matched Lu Bu's. Like a flood, his aura shifted. Prince Duan was indeed a powerful expert, and he had mastered the power of the wind. Unlike Chen Xing's destructive wind, his power focused on speed and agility. Blessed by the law of wind, he blurred out of sight. Suddenly, four identical figures appeared, each one lifelike. They all lunged at Lu Bu from different directions. Chapter 98. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Prince Duan's a slippery one. He seems like just another powerless prince, but the truth is, he's got some serious martial arts skills, and it's not just about training. He's a natural fighter. He pulls off these crazy, complex moves like it's nothing, all smooth and effortless. You can tell he's been putting in the work, grinding away in secret, and seen his share of fights. Sure, he's still not on Lu Bu's level. Lu Bu's a battle-hardened vet, but their styles are totally different. Lu Bu's all about the battlefield. Everything he knows is for war. When he fights, his moves are big and powerful, each hit packing a ton of force, the kind that can take down a general and break through enemy lines. Prince Duan, on the other hand, is more of a street fighter. He's quick on his feet, good at one-on-one combat. He doesn't want to trade blows. He's all about circling, looking for that one perfect opening to strike. That soft sword he carries, sharp enough to cut through anything. It's like a viper. Every attack is a threat. Plus, he's got some wind power thing going on that makes him even more dangerous. It's tough to pin him down. One slip up, and you're done. Guys like Prince Duan are Lu Bu's biggest headache. Like a fly you can't swat, always buzzing around. You gotta stay focused, or he'll get you. But Lu Bu's no average Joe. His real strength isn't just his skills or even his crazy high cultivation level, but his natural talent. He learns fast. He wasn't used to Prince Duan's style at first, but after a few dozen moves, he figured it out and found a way to counter it. Simple: control the arena. He used a series of moves to force Prince Duan into a head-on fight, dragging him into the kind of battle Lu Bu excels at, like playing chess, slowly but surely forcing your opponent into a corner. Lu Bu might not be a chess master, but he's a natural when it comes to fighting. That's why he was the top general of the Three Kingdoms. Boom! The force shook the world as Lu Bu struck with his halberd like lightning. The raw power was insane. Prince Duan was trapped. Lu Bu had him surrounded, no escape. He had to block, but how could his soft sword stand up to Lu Bu's halberd in a straight fight? He braced himself, but the halberd still slammed into him, sending him staggering back. The force tore through his robe, revealing a black suit of armor underneath. The halberd's power crashed down on it, but the armor shrugged it off. No damage. Like Ji Luoyao, Prince Duan was loaded. That soft sword was expensive enough, but the armor was priceless. Even Lu Bu's halberd couldn't break it. Lu Bu narrowed his eyes. He didn't know exactly what kind of armor it was, but it was definitely a high-end piece, like his own halberd. If once doesn't work, try again. It's just armor. Can't stop me forever. Lu Bu smirked. One failed attack wasn't going to stop him. He charged again, swinging his halberd, channeling the power of the world, hitting Prince Duan like a storm. Prince Duan felt Lu Bu's power now. He thought he could take Lu Bu with his hidden skills, but little by little, Lu Bu had turned the tables. Now he was just a punching bag, defending and nothing else. Lu Bu's attack was relentless, making him feel like a small boat in a hurricane, waiting to capsize. He stopped trying to win and focused on not losing. Lu Bu's power was unbelievable. He hadn't fought the Eastern Wilderness Demon King or the Western Region Buddha Lord, but he guessed even those top dogs weren't much stronger than this guy. Boom. Star, another hit. Prince Duan stumbled back, his face went red. The armor was good, but it couldn't block everything. A lot of the force was still getting through. Normally, that wouldn't be a problem. He was strong, at least a heavenly realm master. He might not be as tough as a demon king, but he was no slouch. But Lu Bu's power was on another level. It wasn't just his strength, it was how he channeled it. Even a fraction of that power was dangerous. Under the barrage, Prince Duan was falling apart. The armor might hold, but he was going to be beaten to death inside it. No. This can't keep happening. I'm going to die if I don't do something. That he hated to admit it, but he had to change his plan. This guy's too much. I can't beat him on my own. Guess I'll have to cheat. Prince Duan's eyes flashed. Of course, his sword and armor were already a kind of cheating. Without them, Lu Bu would have crushed him by now, but he needed more. He hesitated for a moment, then steeled himself. He backed off and pulled out a yellow paper from his clothes, covered in glowing runes. Lu Bu frowned. He had no idea what it was. He was still new to this world. Even with the knowledge he'd gained, he couldn't know everything. If Zhang Jiao was here, he'd know that it was a powerful talisman. Made by a qi refiner, a legendary item. Even a royal like Prince Duan had only managed to get this ultra-rare talisman through back channels. He'd saved it for a true emergency, and even now, he hated to use it. But here we are. Swish, star. Before Lu Bu could react, Prince Duan activated the talisman with his spiritual power. It burst into flames and began radiating energy. Golden light blazed, spreading outward. Lu Bu tried to dodge, but the light caught him anyway. In an instant, the light solidified into a golden cage, trapping him. Lu Bu fought back, channeling his energy into a massive ball of light. The two forces collided, creating a stalemate. Prince Duan frowned. He realized that even if he went all out, he still might not be able to take Lu Bu down. Better to take care of someone else first. He looked up at the 18-story prison. His eyes narrowed, then he charged toward the prison, murder in his heart. Chapter 99. You are listening at novelfull.audio. For Prince Duan, while Lu Bu's strength was terrifying, he was still just a man. No matter how strong one person is, they can't overthrow the great Zhou dynasty. Like Tai Wuk before, the 2,000-plus prisoners in Tianlao kept him busy for 3 days straight. How many people are in the great Zhou dynasty? Even if Lu Bu started killing, how many could he even get to? Jiang Hao was different. He was dangerous, a guy who could be a general, a prime minister, and actually overthrow the great Zhou. He'd even been able to save the great Zhou single-handedly. Prince Duan used to just be wary of Jiang Hao's potential, never really thinking he had this much power. It was a just-in-case kind of thing. Now, if Jiang Hao was the mastermind behind all of this, like he suspected, things were critical. So, even if it meant letting Lu Bu go, he had to take this chance to kill Jiang Hao. Even if he was wrong and Jiang Hao wasn't behind it all, better safe than sorry. With Lu Bu tied up by the talisman, no one could stop him anymore. What? You mean Tao Gongwang? That coward was probably hiding in a corner, shaking. Besides, with his Dragon Gate realm cultivation, even if he wasn't a chicken, he wouldn't last around against Prince Duan. Prince Duan didn't even bother with a small fry like him. In a flash, he was down in the 18th level of the prison, and there, he found Jiang Hao, and 3 other strange guys. Prince Duan's eyes narrowed. A wave of danger washed over him. Fresh off his fight with Lu Bu, he was already on edge. If these 3 were as strong as Lu Bu, he'd be walking into a buzzsaw, but that thought didn't last long. It was unlikely there'd be that many top-tier fighters around. He focused on Jiang Hao, his anger burning. Jiang Hao, did you do all this? He demanded. Jiang Hao stayed cool. He chuckled. Whether I did or not, what's it matter? You came to kill me anyway, right? Prince Duan knew Jiang Hao, but Jiang Hao also knew Prince Duan. Except for the martial arts trick, Jiang Hao knew his personality inside and out. On the surface, Prince Duan was polite, but underneath, he was arrogant and proud, and, honestly, he had a right to be. He was talented across the board, he was skilled and capable, he might even be a better leader for the great Zhou than the Empress. But Prince Duan only cared about the Ji family and their rule. Everything else was secondary. Even though they were old friends, they'd always been on different sides, so Jiang Hao wasn't surprised that Prince Duan wanted him dead. Jiang Hao, you are smart. You're right, it doesn't matter anymore. Your very existence threatens the stability of the great Zhou. I'll give you a word of advice, for the sake of old times. Remember this in your next life, sometimes being too smart is a death sentence. Prince Duan didn't waste any more time. Lu Bu was still out there, and who knew when he'd break free. He had to kill Jiang Hao. Fast, he started walking towards Jiang Hao. Step by step, he channeled the power of the world, boosting himself, and the atmosphere in the whole prison grew dark. Looking for a fight, Dong Zhuo and the others exploded. They charged. Besides Li Ru, Dong Zhuo and Niu Fu were also in the heavenly human realm. Dong Zhuo had 2 swords, and Niu Fu had a spear. It wasn't their first choice in weapons. The problem was, they had to take what Jiang Hao had on hand. Jiang Hao had been stuck in this prison for half a year, and he got a reward every day. Lots of random stuff. Dong Zhuo, like a bear, barreled ahead. He was huge, but quick, swinging his swords at Prince Duan's head. The force behind it was like some mythical warrior dancing with his axe. Even Prince Duan was taken aback. Dong Zhuo might not be as strong as Lu Bu, but his presence was just as intense. He was another monster. Normally, he'd love to fight this guy. But now he didn't have the time. His soft sword shot out, clashing with Dong Zhuo's swords. Using his superior cultivation and the power of the law, he barely managed to push the swords away. Then he dodged around the meat mountain with its high defense. Think you can ignore me, old man? Niu Fu cut in from the side. He might not be as strong as Lu Bu or Dong Zhuo, but he'd been a soldier his whole life, fought in countless battles. He was a Xianyang warrior, born on the battlefield. He had experience. He blocked the opening, and his spear stabbed at Prince Duan's chest like lightning. Another heavenly human, Prince Duan hissed, frustrated. How many heavenly human fighters were there in the court? And weren't they supposed to be famous? But in this tiny prison, he'd run into 3 heavenly human fighters, all of them formidable. He couldn't dodge Niu Fu's attack. He gritted his teeth, relying on his armor to withstand the blow. Then, he swung his soft sword, using its flexibility like a whip. The difference in cultivation was too big. The power of the world was on his side. Even though Niu Fu had attacked first, he was sent flying by the sword. Prince Duan wasn't unscathed either, but he didn't have time to recover. He focused on Jiang Hao. Finally, there was no one between them. Li Ru wasn't as scared as Tao Gongwang. He was from Liangzhou, where even the scholars were tough, and he moved to fight, but Jiang Hao stopped him. If Prince Duan killed his only strategist, he'd never forgive himself. Jiang Hao stepped forward, facing Prince Duan. They looked at each other, so close. Jiang Hao was calm, Prince Duan was smug. He could already imagine Jiang Hao dying by his hand. Jiang Hao, die! He roared. His soft sword tightened, then shot out like lightning. The sword was incredibly fast. It reached Jiang Hao's chest in a heartbeat. Any second now, it would pierce him, and that would be that. Chapter 100. You are listening at novelfull.audio. At that moment, Prince Duan was riding a wave of excitement and anticipation. After all, he was about to take out a world-renowned talent himself, eliminating a threat to the great Zhou dynasty's rule. Plus, he was also settling things with an old frenemy he'd known for years. A whole mess of emotions swirled inside him. Even someone as stoic as him was finding it hard to stay cool. On top of that, he'd fought tooth and nail to get here, hacking his way through obstacles. First, he'd used a talisman to catch Lu Bu off guard. Then, he'd dodged Dong Zhuo with some fancy footwork. Next, he traded blows and taken down Niu Fu. Finally, he'd arrived at Jiang Hao. It felt like he'd jumped through hoops, like he was finally about to get the prize after a long journey. With victory in sight, how could he not be pumped? He had zero doubt about the power of his sword. Sure, he wasn't going all out, not even close, but why would he need to pull out all the stops against Jiang Hao? He was a top-tier heavenly man realm expert. one who'd even grasped the power of law. A casual swing of his sword packed a serious punch. He wasn't just facing some weak scholar like Jiang Hao. Any so-called expert wouldn't stand a chance. As far as he was concerned, the moment his sword moved, Jiang Hao was a goner, because no one could save Jiang Hao now. In a heartbeat, the cold tip of his sword reached Jiang Hao's chest. Any second now, it would pierce right through, blood would spray, and that would be the end of Jiang Hao. He could almost picture Jiang Hao falling, the look of disbelief in his eyes, the silent question, why? Don't blame me. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for being too damn good. Not even at the last second, Prince Duan showed no mercy. Instead, he pushed harder, driving the sword towards Jiang Hao's chest. Clang! But instead of the sound of steel slicing through flesh, he heard something else, like metal hitting metal. His sword felt like it was stuck in a rock, refusing to budge. A chill ran down Prince Duan's spine. He looked up. Jiang Hao was still standing there. His sword, the one that could cut through anything, hadn't pierced Jiang Hao's chest. It was being held between two fingers. Where did the fingers come from? Prince Duan's eyes widened, and rage bubbled up. Someone was still trying to stop him. Then he realized something even crazier. Those fingers were Jiang Hao's. Prince Duan froze, stunned, his eyes filled with disbelief. It was like he'd seen something impossible. Jiang Hao hadn't died. He'd stopped the sword with two fingers. No way. Not even an average powerhouse could block his sword like that, let alone a weakling like Jiang Hao. How the hell could Jiang Hao stop his sword? And with just two fingers? How is this even possible? Prince Duan was about to lose it. He'd fought so hard to get to Jiang Hao. He'd thought victory was a sure thing, but it was like God was playing a joke on him. Surprise, his mood. You can imagine. You were hiding your strength. Prince Duan stared at Jiang Hao, barely able to get the words out. He wasn't stupid. He knew what was happening. His eyes burned with anger, furious at being played. Don't look at me like that. You were deceiving me too, remember? So, honestly, we're even. Jiang Hao grinned. Prince Duan opened his mouth but said nothing. Jiang Hao had a point. They'd both been playing each other, so, yeah, even. But, with your talent, how could you be this strong? Prince Duan was still trying to wrap his head around it. I was going to ask you the same thing. As far as I know, you're not that gifted. You shouldn't be able to reach the peak of the heavenly realm, let alone grasp the power of law. What's the secret? Jiang Hao sized up Prince Duan, curiosity shining in his eyes. Prince Duan's face darkened. Without waiting for Jiang Hao to say another word, he snapped. If you want to know, go ask the devil. Before he finished, Prince Duan attacked again. This wasn't some half-hearted swing. Now that he knew Jiang Hao was a threat, he pulled out all the stops. His energy exploded, amplified by the power of heaven and earth and the force of law. The sword transformed into a sky full of stars, raining down on Jiang Hao. Any normal heavenly man realm expert would have struggled to defend against such an attack, but Jiang Hao remained calm. He'd been gathering his strength, and now the five elements, gold, wood, water, fire, and earth, swirled around him, forming a protective barrier. The swords of light slammed into the formation, but couldn't break through. They couldn't even scratch Jiang Hao. Jiang Hao stepped forward, raising a hand and striking with lightning speed. Prince Duan had just exhausted his energy and wasn't ready. His face paled as he realized the danger. He was nowhere near his peak strength after all the fighting he'd done. He was operating at maybe 60-70%, and that was the problem because he was facing something extraordinary: 5 powers of law. Jiang Hao had mastered 5 powers of law. Prince Duan's shock was beyond words. How could someone like that exist? Most people were lucky to grasp 1 power of law, but he had 5. Was he even human? He'd thought Lu Bu was a nightmare, but now he realized who the real boss was. You beat the level. Congrats, now fight the real boss. But the challenge, with a crash, Prince Duan was sent flying.